Hello, everyone. Thank you so much, Sarah, for leading that inspiring discussion. I'm Katie Reytar of the World Resources Institute, and I have the privilege of introducing the next session, where we continue by looking at the application of knowledge. So during this session, you'll hear 3 examples of what that looks like. Walter Jetz will start with an advanced look at the first annual Species Protection Report, which will be released as early as tomorrow, as I understand. The report highlights key takeaways from the Species Protection Index in 2024, representing the current global state of species protection. Next, Matt Clark will take us to Ecuador and look at the subnational context of protected areas. Finally, Doucette Useni will take us to the Democratic Republic of the Congo, sharing how fully customized and co-developed dashboards are being used to support effective national park management. With that, I'll turn it over to Walter. Thank you. Oh, that doesn't work.
Thank you very much, and it's a real pleasure to be here. And I'm the Jack and Laura Dangermond Scientific Chair of the Wilson Biodiversity Foundation. I also direct the Center for Biodiversity and Global Change, and I represent at Yale, and I represent here today the work by a large group of people, a partnership around advancing information, decision-relevant information and measurement in our progress towards, meeting the 2030 goals and bringing species and biodiversity back into some of these conversations. So we're all familiar with 30 by 30. We're here for the Half-Earth Day, and you're familiar with the Half-Earth projects. It's about advancing us to an even greater ambition, but it's not about the number. And if you look at 30 by 30 and the conversations that were had, even in Montreal 2 years ago, and since, in these conversations, sometimes the number had us forget what it's actually all about. It's not about the number. The Half-Earth project is not about the 50%. 30 by 30 isn't really meant to be about the 30%, it's meant to be about biodiversity. So what the large partnership and science team around the Species Protection Index, the Species Protection Report assessment is all about, it's about measuring how much we're progressing in delivering biodiversity outcomes. So one main indicator for the global biodiversity framework is like, okay, how much % area, protected areas or other effective conservation measures have been added in a particular region, a country, or globally. But that alone isn't the full measure. So follow me here along this path that I'm really, really excited about. It's the first time after over 10 years of work and 2-3 years of heavy work, particularly in the last few years, of getting to this point. It's the first time we're launching this report on the state of species protection worldwide, and as we were already informed, it's driven by the component indicator for the global biodiversity framework, the Species Protection Index. And let me quickly walk you through how that works. What it does, that index, it captures how adequately protected areas or other effective conservation measures conserve habitat and support the health and survival of species and their populations. So we have as an ingredient, and I'm not sure I have a clicker here, maybe somebody's clicking for me. Good. As ingredients on the top, of course, the information, okay, where have been protected areas been added, where may they have been decassetted, actually lost. What it's not yet including, I must admit, is measures of the effectiveness of these areas, whether they're paper parks or not. It's something we hope to bring in more with partners in the future. Right now, we're just looking at, we were collaborating with the World Conservation Monitoring Center, the WDPA database on that information. And then we bring to the table all this other information, all sorts of remote sensing layers, other climatic layers, hundreds of millions of species records, and then information about the species ecology, their habitat associations. The environmental data allows us to predict, and this combination of data on the right allows us to predict distributions and find spatial resolution. We call this the habitat suitable ranges. It's the ranges predictions that actually account for what suitable habitat is left in an area. So here we're looking then at a detailed distribution for a species, and if we go to the next slide, overlaying that with the protected area network in the region allows us to assess how adequately we are progressing in representing species through that protected area network. So if most of the range or a large portion overlaps with protected areas, that's good. That gives us some confidence that we're actually progressing and adequately safeguarding that species, making sure it's still around for future generations. If it's only a very, very small portion or no protected area overlaps at all with a species range, that doesn't mean the species is necessarily in trouble, but it does mean it's not effectively safeguarded yet. So we call that a conservation gap. So we ran this analysis for tens of thousands of species, and I'm only showing you part of the results today. That's based on about 35,000 species. We have another 50,000 species that we've added already that we'll be able to bring in more formally in the coming months. But this is essentially the measure that we're able to do today. Next slide. What we're then further doing is looking at that metric at the regional level. That could be a country, it could be a continent, it could be the world, but it could also be a province or a municipality. So there, we're simply looking at the average of these scores. That's the species protection index. What is the average protection score for a species? It's very simple. What's not so simple is developing all this detailed information, and I'm grateful to a large team of scientists who's collaborated on this in partnerships worldwide, including engagement with the Geobiodiversity Observation Network, and then of course this is all produced through a team that's part of a Map of Life, and then feeding into this report with support from the E.O. Wilson Biodiversity Foundation. So in the next slide then, what does this measure address? It's actually addressing a good portion of what target 3, that's the 30 by 30 target, is all about. That target actually isn't just about area. It actually spells out, well, you should really be protecting areas of particular importance for biodiversity. Well, this measure is the only measure in the, at the higher level in the framework that actually addresses this for species and in a continuous way across space, quantitatively. So it's really the only quantitative wall-to-wall metric that does that. It also addresses whether places are ecologically representative, because species and their ecologies are ultimately supporting the ecological functions locally. And then finally, having that information of what's where in parks or not allows you to effectively manage, which is another part of that target. Next slide. So here is one of the key results. That's the overarching result. Yes, we have progressed actually quite a bit over the last 40 years in adding more area to the protected area network. Increasingly, we are seeing OECMs coming in, and here's another caveat. There are so many more places that actually are effective for conservation. Indigenous territories, other even small places where private lands or NGOs are active and stewarding that landscape, those need to be coming into that database so we are able to better account for that. But this is the official database, the WDPA. So we have that progress, and yes, it did translate in progress for species. The global species protection index has been increasing. We are doing better for birds than we do for reptiles or amphibians, not surprising. People look more at birds with better data. Maybe those are some biases coming in some of these decisions. But more importantly for today's conversation is that there are particular standout countries that have been doing amazing progress over the last 20 years, 40 years. So since 2014, 10 years actually, we've seen in Morocco, in Saudi Arabia, and Finland, large additions to the protected area network, 13%, 33%, 14%, and those have translated in real dramatic growth in the safeguarding of species. There are other countries where the progress has been less large in terms of area added, but they have been really smart, or just happenstance, where the places got protected, it did deliver a lot of outcomes for biodiversity, because there are places where species were insufficiently protected and often range restricted. So New Caledonia, Haiti, Timor-Leste are places where a relatively small aerial enlargement made a large contribution to safeguarding of species. Next slide. I'll go through these results relatively quickly. We could spend the whole evening on this. This is a report that will be online tomorrow morning. You can look at all of the results in detail, and there's all sorts of additional information. So here are just a few quick snapshots of particularly well-performing countries in their particular region. And yeah, there is dramatic heterogeneity. unsurprisingly, the European countries are doing well. Well, there isn't that many species saved. We could have a whole other conversation about the conservation burden. If you have thousands of vertebrate species in your country, as Colombia, for example, does, right, the burden is much larger to make sure each one is sufficiently safeguarded. You have to go to many more places. If you're in Central Europe, there is almost no vertebrate species that's restricted to Central Europe. There are many other countries who are actually also conserving species nearby. So it's much easier to get there. Whole other conversation. But this is essentially the metric. And another caveat, some countries are not fully reporting their protected areas network. China, for example, I'm sure is doing much better than it shows up here. It's in purple, very low protected SPI measure, but it's because we are lacking some of that information that's not been fully made public. But then otherwise, there are real hotspots for additional opportunities for better safeguarding species. Look at New Caledonia, look at some of the island nations, look at parts of Asia, Africa, everywhere, essentially. There is a real opportunity to do better. Next slide. This is then another look at this. So this is where the greatest increase has happened over the last 10 years, and some of these success stories that I mentioned earlier. Next slide. We can do the same exercise for marine. So this is only including marine fishes so far. It gets tricky because, yes, we can include other species groups, but you really got to have every species accounted for to be able to fairly look at that at a global scale in a larger group. So mammals are in there as well, marine mammals. So, but it's still a substantial number of species we're able to bring in here, large growth, and then some places that have been particularly proactive in conserving or declaring a large part of their EEC protected, they made immense progress over the last years. Next slide. So here is the national EEC progress displayed, and some real bright spots in the Pacific, South Atlantic, and other places. Again, effectiveness will be a key here, right? How well are they actually guarded, some of these protected areas against fishing, etc. But there has certainly been tremendous progress, but still a lot of way to go. And again, just fishes and marine mammals included here. These values will change as in the future we'll be able to include additional species groups. So we're not done yet in the Pitcairn Islands, right? So there's more yet to be done. Next slide. So here, yeah, that picture, in a way, I already covered it before. Next slide. So what's exciting about this report, there will be more of this in the report, and this measure is that more than just giving us a metric that we can use to track progress against the 2030 targets and goals, it's a measure that allows us to pinpoint the specific species and places where we're lagging or where we're having success. And you can do this not just at a country scale, you can do it at a province, or you can do it for the protected the areas that you as an NGO are managing, or indeed the areas that you as a business are engaged in. I had a great conversation today about commodities sourcing. How could they use that information to better monitor their progress, but to also better support decisions. So here are the successes, but some species that fully benefited from some of these additions that happened just in the last 5-10 years. And then other cases where here in over in the Pacific and parts of West Africa, there's still so much more to be done, but we can, with this information, guide that progress, guide decision-making. Next slide. And that's maybe the most important part of it, because we can put it on the map. So the priority metric that I was talking about, where is the place where you would get the greatest bang for the buck if you were to add conserved areas or do restoration, and whatever the conservation action might be. It doesn't have to be a protected area. It could be something different. We are able to map those out with the same information. So these are the top priority areas here for just a portion of the world where if countries or NGOs or businesses were to invest there, that would really crank up that needle on the SPI, globally, regionally for that country, and help deliver biodiversity outcomes. With that, I just want to thank in the last slide some of the additional partners and invite you to check out that report. Maybe we can leave that slide up. And you can scan this, but it's available on the E.O. Wilson Biodiversity Foundation website and the Map of Life website. And with that, thanks for your attention.
Howdy, folks. My name is Matt. I'm with Nature and Culture International, and I am absolutely thrilled to be here with so many old and new friends. My talk tonight is about subnational protected areas in Ecuador and how they are contributing to 30 by 30 targets and also to biodiversity conservation as evidenced by the Species Protection Index that Walter just shared with us. But before I jump in, I would like to thank the E.O. Wilson Biodiversity Foundation for the opportunity to be here tonight and to be speaking, and to the Yale Center, I should probably put my glasses on to read this, the Yale Center for Biodiversity for doing the map making and the number crunching so that I actually have something to talk about tonight. I really appreciate that. Next slide, please. Nature and Culture, we are a conservation nonprofit working in the tropical Andes and the Western Amazon, specifically Colombia, Ecuador, Peru, and Bolivia. And we have a small but mighty program in Mexico. So why these countries? Well, the very short, simple answer is because we care about biodiversity, and these countries are extremely biodiverse. They are all in the top 20 of mega diverse countries in the world. And of course, they are geographic neighbors with the exception of Mexico and share a common language and cultural similarities that make them a logical place to work. What does Nature and Culture do? We protect large, intact ecosystems, primarily forests, but we also work in the high paramos. We work with national and subnational governments, so provincial, municipal, parochial, and with rural and indigenous communities. And we first put land into protected status, so it's we legally designate it as protected, and then concurrently, we foster the conditions for these areas to be more than just paper parks so that they actually achieve the conservation that we want them to achieve. We work to ensure strong governance, local management capacity, long-term management funding, management plans, et cetera, et cetera. To date, we have helped put more than 10 million hectares into protected status. And to give an example of a recent success, we worked in the Ecuadorian Amazon with 4 Shuar and Achuar indigenous nationalities, or associations, I'm sorry, and the provincial government of Morona Santiago to create the 1.2 million hectare Tarimiat Puhutainunca Reserve. We, Nature and Culture, we focused primarily on creating subnational protected areas, which is one of the reasons I'm talking about subnational areas. They are what we know best. And as an example, by total area, we have had a major role in designating more than 80% of the subnational protected areas in Ecuador. So slide number 3, please. A little context before I dive into this slide. I'm sure most of you know this, but I often show up at things that I don't know what they're talking about. So 30 by 30 is a global initiative to designate 30% of the Earth's land and oceans as protected areas by 2030. That's the target we're aiming for, 30%, although as Walter said, it's a lot more than just the number. The green shapes on this map are the national protected areas in Ecuador. And when you add up all those areas, they equal 24% of the total land area in Ecuador, which is great, but it doesn't, clearly it doesn't achieve the 30% target that we're aiming for. And the 40 number is the SPI, which I will talk about more in a couple of slides. Next slide, please. So on this map, we've added blue areas, which are all of the subnational protected areas. And when you add all of the subnational areas to the national areas, the land area under protection in Ecuador doubles to 46%. So it doesn't just get Ecuador to 30%, it actually catapults Ecuador way over the 30 by 30 target. Next slide, please. Critically, the subnational areas increase the species protection index by almost 50%. The 40 number is the species protection index with just national protected areas. When you go down, the number 66 is the number, the SPI, the species protection index with national and subnational protected areas together. I think even more interesting, though, is the fact that there are 153 species of the almost 3,000 terrestrial vertebrate species in Ecuador. That's what the 2961 is. That's the number of terrestrial vertebrates in Ecuador. 153 species of those almost 3,000 are only covered within subnational protected areas. That is to say that 5% of species in Ecuador are only protected by subnational areas. And 35 species achieve complete coverage within the subnational protected areas, meaning that the subnational areas cover their entire habitat. So to the punchline, to cut to the chase, subnational areas are critical both for reaching 30 by 30 targets and to protect biodiversity. We're going to drill down into another local area here. Next slide, please. So the red outline there is the Ecuador side of the binational corridor, which is a project that we are working on to preserve habitat and habitat connectivity within the Andes of southern Ecuador and northern Peru. And unfortunately, we are not including northern Peru on the map. My apologies to all the Peruvians in the audience. I would just briefly highlight, so the total number of vertebrate species in this corridor is 1,272. And I would highlight that only counting the national protected areas, 20% of the total area is protected. And then when you count subnational protected areas, that number jumps to 69. And similarly, with only national protected areas, the SPI is 41, and it more than doubles when you count subnational protected areas. So I'm near the end of my talk. What are the takeaways here? Walter addressed this. I've been focused on the amount of land that's been legally designated as protected, the land that's been put into some kind of conserved status. And as we know, that is a necessary but insufficient first step. If you declare it and you walk away, you've done nothing more than create a paper park. So in this 30 by 30 initiative, let's not lose sight of the fact that we need to not just designate protected areas, but we need to manage them effectively. And that will take funding. Management funding is not sexy, but it's entirely critical. Everyone loves to create protected areas. Management, it's like, the analogy I came up with today is it's like buying a house. It's wonderful when you sign the closing on your house, and then when you're cleaning out the gutter 6 months later, it's not super fun. But management is critical. So that's my plea here, is that we don't forget about management funding. We need to allocate resources, not just for creation, but for subsequent management. Point number 2, which I've already made several times, subnational areas matter. Ecuador will not achieve 30 by 30 without subnational areas. And as the Species Protection Index shows, subnational areas are critical for biodiversity conservation. So my second plea is, let's not forget just about funding in general for management, but let's not forget about funding for management of subnational protected areas. And then my last point is that we are just becoming, as an organization, just becoming familiar with the tools that have been shared with the Half-Earth Map and this wonderful Species Protection Index. We are going to be able to use it because it provides critical information about the size, shape, and location of protected areas, where to put them, how big to make them, so that we can maximize biodiversity conservation. The SPI provides a way for us to prioritize where we allocate resources, because we all know that we do not have, we are limited in the amount of resources we have. And then the final point is that creating protected areas is an exercise in building social and political will. It requires effective marketing. And I think that this SPI is an elegant and easy way to communicate biodiversity benefits so that we can build the political and social will to save biodiversity. Thanks very much. That's all I got for you tonight. And with that, I will turn it over to Doucette. Thanks very much. I appreciate it.
Hello, everyone. I am delighted to be here tonight and specifically honored to be part of this panel. Each intervention has been incredibly rich, and I do hope to continue with this streak. I'm Doucette Useni. I'm the partnerships liaison to the managing director of ICCN, which is Institut Congolais pour la Conservation de la Nature, the wildlife authority in the DRC, managing 91 protected areas. Next slide, please. So the DRC, which is right in the middle of Africa, is the second largest country on the African continent and the 11th biggest in the world. And it is home to many endemic species like the okapi and other rare species, with many different ecosystems, ecosystem types, land uses, and community cultures that all need to be considered in management planning. The DRC is considered to be the world's 10 mega biodiverse country, and we have about 2,146 species of terrestrial vertebrates. Next slide, please. So we have about 110 endemic vertebrates in different taxonomic groups, as depicted in the picture above, including 42 amphibians, 9 birds, 23 endemic reptiles, and 36 mammals. And our protection index value is 63, which is above the global average, like Walter mentioned in his talk earlier. And we already have an extensive system of protected areas. 14% of land surface is already protected, all managed by ICCN, with key places like the Virunga National Park, which is the continent's most biologically diverse protected area, the Kahuzi-Biega National Park, an exceptional habitat for the protection of tropical rainforests and eastern lowland gorillas. However, we still need to reach the 30 by 30 target. And we have set a target of 17% by 2025 and 30% by 2030. And in the past 3 decades, there hasn't been good access to geospatial data at government level in the DRC. This is because we have been focused on security matters, as the DRC is heavily affected by war. And when you're so focused on keeping what you have, it's hard to think about what expansion of any kind you can do. So the need for data that can incorporate all of these considerations across the entirety of a large country with complex ecosystems to help inform decisions and progress towards 30 by 30, including identification of potential new protected areas, and also maximize the conservation impact in existing areas. And to do so, we have established a collaborative partnership to address the need for good geospatial data at a national scale that meets management needs in order to inform effective decision-making. This partnership is between ICCN Yale, E.O. Wilson Biodiversity Foundation, and Esri. And how this partnership works in practice, next slide, please, In September, we visited the Mangrove Marine Park, which is the only marine park in the DRC, with more than 500 species of terrestrial vertebrates. It is home to many communities living within the park boundaries, and this is a good example of needing to bring together considerations for both species and human needs to make good management decisions. And our communities within this park specifically are very involved in conservation efforts. It's actually laying season for sea turtles, and the communities are very much involved in picking up the eggs to ensure that they are taken to safer cages when they will hatch. And whilst we were there, so this is the meeting with management, and then the visit with the communities, and then within the park, some of the activities, but also training on data as well as improving mapping capacities. And in order to use all of this data collected, we have created a personalized dashboard system. This is a national dashboard that is private to ICCN. And here we are showing province-level insights about the species that occur in each province and how well they are currently protected. This data can be reported at any level. You can select individual parks, like the marine park, the Mangrove Marine Park. And you can, of course, dive deeper to see the individual species data that underlines these predictions. This dashboard also allows us to upload our own private data and have additional information to understand the species protection in the DRC relative to other places, such as the trends to its protection over time, as well as habitat loss. These tools are supported by Esri software that allows us to do additional analysis and reporting using tools that inform decision-making processes. We are currently testing tools to efficiently upload data from the field directly into the dashboard to avoid having to go from spreadsheets to file cabinets. And we want to streamline going forward from the data on the ground to real-time decision-making. So this dashboard focuses on biodiversity data to support ICCN's decision-making, and it can support additional data collection on the ground, seamless upload, integration, processing of that data and visualization, and downloading of the patterns that emerge in the ways that aid ICCN processes. And looking forward, we are actively looking to scale the biodiversity monitoring and reporting programs to other parks and proposed conservation sites in the DRC. And we will work together to take what we're doing in the DRC and expand to other countries. I would like to thank the E.O. Wilson Foundation, Yale Center for Biodiversity and Global Change, as well as Esri, our partners, who are each bringing amazing contributions to this partnership. And thank you for your attention.
Great. Well, thank you so much to our presenters, Walter, Matt, and Doucette. That session was all about application of knowledge, and I think it's worth noting how they highlighted applying knowledge at different scales as well, from subnational to national to global. These are all important parts of building up to the 30 by 30 or half Earth targets. Implementation, of course, has to happen locally on the ground, and it's all these local actions that will take us to the global target.